Human man and alien woman pay the price for forbidden love. The recycled synthetic citrus, which was exactly the sort of diplomatic ambiance that made Jace Varelli question his life choices. Not that he was allowed to question them out loud. He was technically on duty, standing stiff in a regulation jacket that pinched his armpits like it held a grudge. His job was simple: fly the brass in, smile like a good little space cowboy, and avoid eye contact with anyone more evolved than a vending machine. He failed on the last point almost immediately. She entered the hall with a grace that could make gravity apologize. Tall, lithe, ears elegantly curved like sculpted blades, eyes glowing faintly silver beneath ridged brows. Serath, an Allari envoy. Also, officially, the first alien Jace had seen in person who didn't make him think of coral reefs or giant space frogs. No, Serath looked frustratingly, dangerously human. Aside from the ears, and the way she moved like she'd trained in zero-G ballet and ancient murder, she passed him without a glance. Of course she did. He was wearing boots that squeaked when he walked and carried a sidearm that barely worked in his best dreams. She, meanwhile, looked like she could disable a battleship with just her smirk. Jace turned to watch her go and collided with a drinks drone, which exploded in a sticky cloud of carbonated ambassador juice. "I hope that wasn't diplomacy-flavored," he muttered, trying to towel orange foam off his sleeve. "Pilot Varelli," came a voice like rain striking metal. "Are you in the habit of assaulting refreshments, or is this part of the human greeting ritual?" He spun around. She stood there unreadable as moonlight. "Only when they sneak up on me," he said. "They're ruthless, those beverages." Serath tilted her head slightly. "So I've heard." That might have been the end of it. A moment of embarrassment and wit lost in the endless churn of interstellar politics, but the Concord's security system chose that exact moment to glitch, flooding the hallway with red lights and an ominous klaxon that sounded like a robotic goat screaming into a fan. Jace blinked. Was that the lockdown alarm, or did someone just prank the AI again? Before Serath could answer, bulkhead doors slammed shut on both sides of the corridor. Lockdown. Emergency. No one in or out. And of course, it had to happen while he was alone with the alien envoy. "I swear this isn't a kidnapping," he said, raising his hands as if to show he had no plans for interspecies ransom. She gave him a long, evaluating look. "Your species has odd methods of hostage-taking. Where are the demands?" "Coming right up," he said, pulling a comm from his belt. It fizzled, sparked, and died with the dignity of a popped balloon. "Okay, that's new. I believe," Serath said, walking to the wall console and laying her palm against a shimmering glyph, "that your station has been sabotaged." "By who? Possibly someone with a sense of humor?" The lockdown sequence contains a looped video file of two cats in a hoverchair race. Jace leaned over. "Oh yeah, that's Jenkins. He's been trying to sneak that into the emergency subroutines for months. He'll be thrilled it finally worked." Serath raised an elegant brow. "Your colleague has reprogrammed a defense system to display feline competitions. Let's call it cultural enrichment." They were stuck for hours. The hallway was sealed tighter than a bureaucrat's wallet, and the maintenance drones had apparently decided to unionize and were refusing to work until someone brought them actual oil instead of synthetic lubricant. While they waited, Jace made a game out of guessing Allari social customs based on wild stereotypes. Serath countered by listing the most ridiculous human fashion trends she'd read about in archives. "Jeans with holes in them," she said flatly. "Intentional holes. You pay more for them." "Not just holes," Jace corrected. "Strategic air vents. Helps us cope with them." Later, they shared emergency rations. Hers was a gelatinous cube that tried to crawl off the tray, while his was something pretending very hard to be beef. They exchanged stories. Her training in harmonic diplomacy, which involved mental resonance and, confusingly, aggressive tea ceremonies. His misadventures as a pilot for hire, including the time he accidentally married a sentient cloud. He didn't notice when the tension began to shift. Didn't realize until much later that she was laughing more easily, that her stiff composure had softened like metal in warm hands. That he had started watching the way her eyes lit up when she corrected him. That the ache he felt wasn't from the bruised rib he'd gotten falling into a janitorial locker, it was from knowing she'd be gone once that door opened again. And eventually, it did. The lockdown lifted with a sheepish announcement from the station AI, which blamed the entire event on unscheduled data enrichment and promised complimentary therapy vouchers. Jace expected her to walk away without a word, but as she turned to go, Serath paused. "Your species," she said, "is chaotic, illogical, and dangerously impulsive. Thanks, we try." She met his eyes, but occasionally amusing. Then she was gone. He stood there for a long moment, listening to the hum of the station's systems, watching her vanish into the crowd. And he knew, with a sinking feeling somewhere below his second spleen, long story, that the universe had just made a very complicated joke at his expense. And the punchline? He was already falling. Jace knew he was in trouble the second he started scheduling fake maintenance runs to the diplomatic level. Not that anyone questioned him. He'd built up a solid reputation as someone who couldn't tell the difference between a plasma coil and a fancy coffee machine. So when he accidentally rerouted a food drone to deliver 3 bags of spicy algae chips to the Ilari quarters, no one batted an eye. Serath, on the other hand, batted both eyes and then narrowed them at him. "You really think a surprise snack delivery counts as espionage?" "Please," Jace said, flopping into the seat across from her without invitation. "Espionage is way more boring. This is diplomacy. Salty diplomacy. I don't believe your intentions are diplomatic. I brought the good flavor. I don't eat algae. You haven't tried Earth-style algae. I suspect that's a threat." Still, she didn't make him leave, which, in Jace's book, meant he was basically engaged. She continued working on her tablet, fingers flying through glowing symbols in a language that looked like someone had taught calculus to calligraphy. He watched her, quietly impressed. "Is that official Ilari ambassador stuff, or are you just pretending to be busy so I'll stop flirting?" "I am updating our security protocols. Someone has been inserting unauthorized access logs into the docking bay systems." "That's crazy. Who would do such a thing?" "Your access ID is labeled Captain Hotpants." "I was framed." She didn't laugh, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Victory. They spent the rest of the hour in near silence, broken only by the occasional sarcastic exchange and a shared disdain for the station's climate controls, which alternated between glacial tundra and microwave popcorn. Their stolen time together continued like that. A few minutes during inspections, an excuse to calibrate the docking clamps. That one time they accidentally got stuck in a gravity chamber where the artificial field made everyone's voice sound like they'd inhaled helium. Serath almost cracked a smile when Jace tried to explain quantum resonance while sounding like a chipmunk. They were cautious always, but not cautious enough. Someone saw something, a shadow in the corner of a monitor, a glance held too long during a briefing. It didn't take much. Paranoia, after all, was humanity's favorite pastime right after binge-watching and over-engineering everything. The warning came as a message smuggled into Serath's personal archive. "Cease contact, or be recalled." She read it twice, then she deleted it. Jace found out the next day when he showed up at their usual hideout, a forgotten utility corridor behind the hydroponics bay, and found her pacing. "They know," she said simply. He didn't need to ask who. "I got a memo too," he said, tossing her a data chip. "Something about fraternization with a non-human entity constitutes grounds for immediate suspension, neural audit, and reassignment to a cryogenic waste station. Which sounds like a lovely vacation spot, honestly. They'll come for us? Then let's not be here when they do." She looked at him like he'd just suggested flying into a sun. "You want to run?" "I prefer the term strategic unavailability. We get a ship, we disappear. There are whole sectors the brass won't touch. Places full of smugglers and weird mushrooms that try to sell you religion. You're serious." "I mean, I didn't smuggle a stealth-capable scout vessel into Dock 7 just for fun. Okay, that's a lie. It was mostly for fun, but now it has a purpose." Her silence stretched. "We'll never be safe," she said eventually. "Nope, but we'll be free, or at least too annoying to catch." That night they left, slipped through station security disguised as part of a cargo drone inspection team. The drone itself was filled with fake NutriPaste and one very confused ferret in a spacesuit. Jace called him Admiral Fuzzy. Serath refused to acknowledge the name. They launched the ship in silence, holding their breath until the Concorde faded from their rear screens. Then Jace let out a whoop and punched the nav controls, setting course for the Lorne Verge, a dead zone of outlaw stations and cosmic anomalies with names like the Hole Where God. Their ship, a modified Ronin-class scout, was barely big enough for 2 people and a snack dispenser that occasionally tried to bite. Serath set up her data archives in the aft chamber. Jace converted the cargo bay into a pseudo-kitchen, where everything came out tasting vaguely of disappointment and old metal. Despite the stress, despite the risk, they laughed more than either of them expected. He taught her how to curse in 6 Terran dialects. She taught him how to meditate using harmonic resonance, though he mostly used it to nap dramatically. They took odd jobs, smuggling medical nanites to border colonies, running messages between rebel outposts. Once, they delivered a singing cactus to a warlord who paid them in live chickens. Space chickens, but still. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't safe, but it was theirs. Still, it wasn't long before the galaxy noticed. 2 fugitive names lighting up bounty boards. A human pilot and an Alari envoy traveling together. Whispers of forbidden love, conspiracies, political sabotage, bounties rose, hunters followed. They barely escaped an ambush in the Uros Drift, where a cloaked interceptor chased them through an asteroid field shaped like a frozen scream. Jace flew like a lunatic. Serath disabled the enemy ship with an improvised EMP burst made from a coffee machine and leftover noodles. Afterward, bleeding from a shallow cut and missing part of his boot, Jace slumped against the control panel. Still think running was a bad idea? Yes. Still glad we did it? She hesitated. Yes. They didn't talk about the future. Not yet. Every day was a gamble. Every night a miracle. But in the stolen quiet between starbursts and sirens, Jace sometimes caught her watching him with a look that wasn't entirely exasperation. And when she smiled, just once, when he sang an off-key rendition of an Earth lullaby to distract a child they were rescuing, he knew something fragile and real had taken root. It wasn't safe. It wasn't wise. But it was growing. The Vexari system wasn't on any of the official charts for good reason. It floated in the galactic equivalent of a cosmic alleyway, a blind spot where broken laws and physics went to have awkward conversations. The rogue planet at its center, Vexari Prime, had no sun, no government, and no regard for personal hygiene, which made it perfect for fugitives in love and possibly in denial. Jace guided the scout ship, the Knuckleberry Fin, through its dense atmosphere with all the precision of someone trying to land a slippery fish using a spoon. He managed to park it on a cliff ledge just wide enough for a slightly nervous goat. The ledge groaned. The ship groaned louder. "We're not dead," Jace said, unstrapping himself, which honestly is a nice change. "We'll see how long it lasts," Serath replied, scanning the air composition. "High sulfur content, trace radiation, slight chance of spontaneous gravity anomalies. Sounds like a romantic getaway. If your definition of romance involves your atoms being redistributed across 4 dimensions. Hey, some people call that bonding." They descended into the outskirts of the central settlement, a patchwork mess of domes, spires, and shipping containers duct-taped together with alien resin and hubris. The local currency was rumor, and the taverns were run by AI that had long since abandoned logic for jazz philosophy. The bar they entered was called Entropy and Eggs. A neon sign flickered overhead, offering both existential beverages and hot breakfast lies. Inside, a spider bot scuttled up to them, its torso adorned with a hologram of a tuxedo and a monocle it didn't need. The bot introduced itself as Lord Whiskers V and offered them a drink menu sorted by emotional consequence. "We're here to lay low," Serath muttered. Jace nodded toward the back. "Table with the least amount of laser scorch marks. That's our kind of subtle." They sat, they ordered something vaguely liquid, and then they waited. Their contact was late. Not unusual on Vexari Prime. Punctuality was considered an act of aggression, but Jace didn't like the way the static on the local comm frequencies buzzed against his skull like bees with Bluetooth. Serath kept an eye on the door, her fingers twitching near her concealed stunner. Jace tapped a rhythm on the table with a spoon he'd borrowed 3 systems ago and never returned out of spite. The door finally creaked open, and in walked a walking contradiction. Dren Talvo used to be a fellow pilot, once famous for crashing a stolen battlecruiser into a luxury asteroid resort for the thrill of it. Now he looked like a washed-up legend dipped in motor oil and poor life choices. He wore a half-cloak made of receipts and a grin that deserved its own warning label. "Jace," he bellowed arms wide, "still alive! I lost money on that bet. Dren, Jace said with a forced smile. Still ugly, I won money on that. They hugged like people who weren't sure if a knife was coming. Dren nodded politely to Serath, then sat down and stole Jace's drink without asking. I heard the whole galaxy's looking for you two, Dren said, leaning in. You guys start a war or just elope badly? Somewhere between, Jace said. You still know the smuggler routes through the drift? I know them, Dren said. I also know what a bounty that high can buy. A freighter, a nice moon, a foot massage from a tentacle masseuse who doesn't ask questions. Serath's eyes narrowed. If you were going to betray us, you wouldn't be stalling with banter. I could be dramatic, I'm known for that. You once faked your death by mailing your own foot to the authorities. Exactly, Flair? Jace stood up slowly. Dren, please don't make me regret not spacing you the last time you stole my socks. Dren sighed and handed over a data crystal. Nav coordinates. Safe zone beyond the Tetra Belt. Place called the Archive. Dead zone, mostly abandoned. You'll be ghosts out there. And what's the price? Just stay alive. Maybe prove love's not a dumb myth. Someone's gotta... They left Entropy and Eggs with a new destination and a fresh sense of unease. But at least they had a lead. They didn't even make it back to the ship before it exploded. Well, not entirely exploded. More like imploded, caught in a temporal snare that folded the vessel like a paper crane and then sneezed it into another timeline. The blast sent them flying. Jace woke up buried under what he hoped was decorative rock and not someone's fossilized pet. Serath pulled him out, coughing through the smoke. Sabotage, she said, voice hoarse. You think Dren sold us out? No, this wasn't his style. Too subtle, too effective. They limped through the outskirts until they found a mechanic shack that doubled as a salvage yard and tripled as a weapons dealer. The owner was a cyborg who'd replaced all his organic parts except for one human foot, which he kept in a glass case and called Kevin. They bartered their last spare plasma cell for transport, a rusted shuttle that looked like it had been designed by someone who lost a bet with gravity. Jace named it Plan C. Serath refused to acknowledge the name. Their escape was messy. They had to dodge a bounty hunter in an invisible suit who kept announcing his position by accidentally sneezing into his voice modulator. Serath managed to trap him in a time-looping trash bin. He's still in there, arguing with himself about banana peels. Finally, they reached open space again, this time with coordinates to a place no one cared to visit anymore. The Archive, a relic station floating in the forgotten edge of the galaxy. Abandoned, decayed, untouched by law or memory. As the stars stretched around them and the ship coughed into sublight, Jace leaned back in his cracked pilot's chair. Well, he said, on the bright side, we can't possibly get more wanted than we already are. Serath glanced at the long-range scanner, which lit up with a new bounty alert. Their faces. Increased reward open target. Apparently you lack imagination. He smiled. One of my better flaws. They kept flying. Because running wasn't just survival anymore. It was a strange, stubborn form of hope. The Archive looked exactly like something a haunted AI would dream up after watching too many documentaries on failed utopias. It drifted in a lazy spin, a skeletal cylinder wrapped in collapsing data rings. Once a beacon of universal knowledge, and now a hollow ruin echoing with forgotten code and bad design choices. Jace and Serath approached slowly, running a full scan while the autopilot coughed and wheezed like a 70-year-old jazz trumpet. The ship didn't so much dock as gently crash into one of the Archive's lateral ports. Jace turned to Serath and held up a hand. On a scale from 1 to I told you so, how much are you expecting this place to try and eat us? I haven't ruled out it being sentient, Serath said. Possibly lonely, possibly homicidal. Great, so we're visiting your extended family. They entered through a decompression corridor with flickering grav lights and a friendly digital assistant who welcomed them with, "Thank you for visiting the Archive. Please do not scream. Screaming is a violation of archival etiquette." Inside, the station was colder than expected and far more intact than it should have been. Data conduits still hummed, ancient systems still blinked, and security cameras tracked them with all the subtlety of a curious toddler. Every hallway was lined with dormant terminals, many of which sparked to life as Serath passed by. "I don't like this," Jace said. "It's too functional. It's like the place was waiting for us." "Maybe it was," Serath said. The Alari used this station centuries ago to store interspecies treaties, classified material, prohibited philosophy, memory recordings. And recipes? Highly classified soup formulas, yes. So naturally, we're breaking in. Again, they reached a central node that resembled a throne room built by a committee of over-caffeinated librarians. Serath connected her personal archive crystal to the primary interface and began decrypting the old data branches. Holograms burst to life around them, treaties signed in secret, declarations of unity between humans and Alari, all sealed and buried when the political winds shifted. "This is what they erased," she said. "Proof that our peoples once worked together." Jace leaned in, watching a projection of a joint Earth-Alari peace conference that ended in laughter and shared awkward dances. One ambassador was clearly doing the robot while someone else played a harmonica. "They really buried this?" Jace asked. "The harmonica alone is historic." Serath kept searching. One file stood out, a heavily locked archive with a red warning glyph. Dissonance protocol. She hesitated. Jace leaned over her shoulder. "Sounds important, or like a rejected punk band." She activated the file. The room darkened. A hologram flickered to life, an Alari elder and a human general seated together. The message was blunt. "The Union is too dangerous. Cultural bleed is accelerating. Our people grow curious about each other. Borders are softening, identities merging. We must stop it before control is lost." It ended with one phrase, spoken in both languages: "No entanglement." Jace exhaled. "So they feared unity more than war. They feared being changed," Serath said. "They feared becoming one. And here we are, a living glitch in their perfect divide." Suddenly, alarms blared. Not the friendly, apologetic kind. The kind that suggested weaponized vacuum might become part of your immediate future. A voice crackled over the internal system. "Unauthorized access. Intruders detected. Security activation in progress." Jace drew his sidearm. Serath closed the data stream. "Guess the archive's not into romance," he said. "Correction. Someone else is here." A shot rang out, an energy pulse that vaporized a nearby console. Jace ducked. Serath pulled him behind a support beam. Footsteps echoed from the far corridor, followed by the unmistakable whir of Alari neural rifles. "Incoming." "How did they find us?" "Probably tracked the encrypted file retrieval." "So we led them here." "Technically, you led us into a wall earlier, so I'm still blaming you for directional failures." The hunters moved fast, Alari strike operatives in stealth armor, blending into the archive's shadows like ghosts with excellent trigger discipline. Jace and Serath ducked, dodged, and argued their way through a running gunfight across the upper tiers of the data chamber. "Left!" Jace yelled. "Right!" They both went the wrong way and crashed into a library drone that screamed in binary and dropped a pile of metal encyclopedias on Jace's foot. "I think I broke history," he groaned. Serath pulled him up. "We need a way out." He pointed toward a maintenance shaft. "Through there. Backup ejection tunnel. I saw it in the schematics, probably. 50-50. Could be an escape route. Could be a trash chute. But at least it'll smell better than this conversation." They crawled through the ductwork like disgruntled rats. Behind them, the archive's interior lit up with red pulses as defense systems reactivated. Old-school plasma turrets and floating seeker mines that looked like deadly disco balls. As they neared the exit hatch, Serath paused. "We can't leave the data," she said. "We have to expose the truth." Jace stared at her. "You want to upload the most controversial file in two civilizations' history from a half-broken archive while being hunted by professional assassins? Yes. I love you, but I hate that I love you." She handed him a neural uplink cable. "Buy me 30 seconds. He kissed her forehead and turned to face the incoming fire. "You've got 35, he said, "because I'm feeling generous." He laid down covering fire with his jury-rigged blaster, shouting obscenities in both Terran and what he thought was Alari, but might have been seafood. Meanwhile, Serath connected the archive to the ship's long-range relay antenna and began the upload. One file. All of it. Broadcast on open frequencies. The screen blinked. Transmitting. The transmission cut through subspace like a beacon. All across nearby systems, encrypted terminals lit up. Political archives trembled. Hidden truths stirred. The door behind them exploded open. More operatives stormed through. One raised a rifle. Too late. The upload reached 100%. Jace grinned. "We're going to be legends or headlines?" "Hopefully both." They dove into the escape tunnel, tumbling through darkness just as the archive's defense systems overloaded and triggered an energy pulse that fried half the station. They landed in a heap in a debris field outside, where the emergency beacon from Plan C still pulsed faintly. Jace groaned. "We really have to stop escaping places by falling." "You're still alive," Serath said. "Statistically, that's success." He looked at her, bruised, bleeding, grinning like an idiot. "I'd fall 100 more times if it means we keep doing this together." She raised an eyebrow. "Romantic, also impractical." "Story of my life." They climbed into the wreckage of the shuttle and blasted off toward open space. Their names now public, their story unleashed, and every bounty hunter in the galaxy officially very, very annoyed. The bounty tripled overnight, apparently uploading decades of suppressed diplomatic records onto every major interstellar network was considered treasonous, destabilizing, and according to one especially offended Earth bureaucrat, extremely rude. Serath read that one aloud just to hear Jace laugh while he patched a coolant leak with chewing gum and guilt. They spent the next few weeks dodging attention and occasionally throwing it off by broadcasting fake travel logs through an old entertainment satellite. Somewhere out there, a dozen bounty hunters were currently chasing what they thought was Jace and Serath's romantic getaway through a luxury spa asteroid. Spoiler, it was actually a feedback loop of a holovid called Love Among the Plasma Wolves, starring Jace doing his best dramatic voiceover and Serath providing utterly deadpan sound effects. They hid in the corona of a red dwarf, powered down the engines, and waited. Serath used the time to analyze the galactic reaction. The Archive's broadcast had ignited protests across the human coalition and the Ilari sphere. Young people marched. Old politicians denied everything while sweating on live feeds. Philosophers argued with bloggers. A popular Ilari musician released a song titled "Entanglement is Inevitable," which charted in 6 systems. "This isn't just about us anymore," Serath said one night, cross-legged on the deck, watching data streams flicker across a floating interface. Jace handed her a warm drink synthesized from 27% real ingredients. "Was it ever? At first, then we became a symbol. Now we're a problem. I've been a problem for years. Ask my flight instructors." She didn't smile, not immediately, but he saw the tension in her shoulders loosen just a fraction. "I don't want to be hunted forever." "Neither do I," he said. I don't know, a farm, a place, somewhere we can grow weird alien tomatoes and have arguments about whose turn it is to feed the semi-sentient cleaning drone." She paused. "I thought you were joking the first time you said that." "I was. Then it stopped being funny." They didn't agree on what came next. Not right away. But after a debate involving charts, probability matrices, and 2 separate rounds of intergalactic charades, they reached a decision. They weren't going to run anymore. They were going to show up. Not right away. The location was neutral space. Barely. A fractured moon orbiting a black hole on the outer edge of the Ilari human armistice zone. Once used for peace talks, now abandoned except by scavengers and cosmic weirdos. Jace landed Plan D. They'd run out of letters long ago, on a cracked landing pad littered with rusted droids and one defiant plant in a soup can. He wore his old pilot jacket, patched and fraying. Serath wore her diplomat's insignia, half-burned but still gleaming. They walked side by side into a silent meeting dome, still echoing with memories of promises broken. The signal they sent was simple. "We'll talk. Come unarmed, or don't come at all." 2 ships arrived. One carried Admiral Rourke, Earth's top strategist and Jace's former commanding officer, who once threatened to launch him into deep space for turning a training sim into a karaoke competition. The other held Speaker Thalesh, Ilari mind counselor and the closest Serath had to a mentor, until Serath became her greatest disappointment. There were no pleasantries, no guards. Just 4 people and the weight of a galaxy waiting. "You're criminals," Rourke began. "You're afraid?" Serath replied. "You broadcast lies. We broadcast truth." Jace stepped forward. "You buried Unity because it scared you, because it would make you obsolete, so you told us to fear each other." Thalesh's eyes flicked to Serath. "You think chaos is progress? I think pretending we're separate is a bigger lie than anything we shared." They laid it all out. The archive data, the sabotage, the bounty contracts, the threats, the ridiculous attempts on their lives, including the bounty hunter who disguised himself as a vending machine. That part got an involuntary snort from Rourke. And then Serath made the final move. She handed over a sealed data core. This is proof of coordinated suppression campaigns across both governments, Alari and human. Rourke looked at it like it might explode. You're giving this up? I'm giving it forward. You can choose to bury it again, but you won't stop the change. The movement's already started. You can fight it, or you can lead it. Silence stretched, long enough for Jace to get itchy and whisper, "We could have just eloped again. I hear Jupiter weddings are making a comeback." Rourke muttered something about paperwork. Thalesh sighed like she hadn't slept in a decade. Then, quietly, Rourke slid the data core into his case. Thalesh nodded once. "Go. You won't be pursued. For now." Jace blinked. "That's it? For now," Thalesh repeated. "Don't push your luck." Jace and Serath turned and walked out. No applause. No fireworks. Just the sensation that something had shifted, imperceptibly, but permanently. Months later, they lived in the ruins of a defunct listening post orbiting a blue dwarf star. Jace had turned the comm array into a kitchen. Serath grew gravity-resistant herbs in what used to be a fuel tank. They had a solar goat named Kelvin and a drone that insisted on singing old pop songs through a busted speaker. News filtered in slowly. Talks had resumed.